Wodan Timbur coaster is arguably the headlining attraction at Europa Park in Germany. It is the only wood coaster in the park. It's also one of the few coasters there not built by MACK Rides that owns the park. This is a GCI wooden roller coaster. It's actually the largest GCI ever built and is tied with the fastest, along with Python and Bamboo Forest, at 62 miles per hour. It's a giant ride, but arguably the best part about it isn't even the ride, it's the theming around it. We got some good stuff to talk about with this ride, so let's dive on in. First things first, you might be thinking the name of the ride is a little strange, Wodan Timbur Coaster. In English, it actually translates to Odin Wood Coaster. That's because this ride has a general Norse mythology theme. It's located in the Iceland section of the park, so you can find it interweaving with rides like Blue Fire Mega Coaster and Atlantica's Super Splash. I know there's not a ton of people that are super knowledgeable about everything that goes into Norse mythology. Probably the extent of Norse mythology that I know is from the Thor films, but you don't have to have an extensive background to be able to appreciate all of the theming that goes into this queue line. I joked when I was walking through the line that felt like almost an attraction in of itself. They could have made the queue a standalone walkthrough, and I would have enjoyed it just as much. But no, it leads to an actual ride at the end. And it's a good one too. It is my personal favorite ride at Europa Park, and that's because of its fast pace and thrilling elements. It's not a perfect ride, but all in all, it's clearly a fan favorite. Whenever you go to Europa Park, you always hear people talking about Wodan, and the ride holds up, and it's well taken care of too. Europa Park as a whole is just so well managed, so yeah, they're going to take good care of their wooden coaster. So let's talk about what happens during this ride experience. You board your Millennium Flyer trains, pull down your lap bar, and when you dispatch out of the station, one of my favorite parts is that the statues located towards the top of the station all turn their heads in sync watching the train depart. That is so cool. It's subtle details like that I love, because they did not have to do that at all, but they chose to, and I love them for that. But when you leave the station, you don't go straight into the lift hill. There's a small little pre-lift section, just a little bunny hill and turn that leads up into the lift. Nothing crazy. I mean, don't expect any airtime here. It just spices things up as they get from point A to point B. You begin climbing up your lift, gorgeous view of the park all around you, and you reach a height of 131 feet. That's pretty big for a wooden coaster. Like I said earlier, it's currently the tallest GCI. There's not a whole lot of wooden coasters out there that reach this high. Most like to hover around the 100-foot mark or maybe a little less. So that already tells you that this is a very prominent ride. Your ride experience begins with a right-hand turn, immediately building up some speed. You're banking to the right, and you keep that bank almost all the way around, and then at the last second, right as you start to go down the drop, you level out and begin your descent, straight through the wood structure that was holding up the lift hill that you just went over. And from here on out, the ride is going to be exciting from start to finish. You dive low, pass right next to the station. It actually goes underneath the exit ramp when you're getting off the ride, and you start up the first big hill. This doesn't feel like a typical airtime hill because it does a little twist at the top. You still get airtime, definitely, but it doesn't pull you back down at the same rate that you rose up because it immediately throws you to the right, banking underneath Blue Fire. And you stay on this prolonged turn, now diving underneath the entrance for the ride. So as you can imagine, that's a great visual. When you're walking up to the ride, you have this giant arch with some of the Greek gods, these amazing statues, and then the ride twisting and diving right underneath you. Certainly eye-catching. Following that moment, we have a station fly-through. There's only a handful of GCIs that do this, including Thunderhead, Troy, Apocalypse at Magic Mountain. Wodan Timbur Coaster is another one. It's a great way to reuse existing structure as well as liven things up. Certainly keeps your interest when you're in the station, just seeing that train fly through, and it's very loud. And pretty much from here on out, you stay on the exact opposite side of the ride. This is the back end that goes towards Atlantica's Super Splash. Most of these elements stay fairly low to the ground, which is normal for a GCI. On this hill right after the station, you have this great twist to the left. You sharply bank and then quickly move to the right, fly underneath a shaded structure, pop up into a nice bit of airtime. This is your furthest moment on the ride. You turn to the left to head back, and we have an airtime hill over Atlantica's Super Splash's first drop. And again, that's one of the things that makes this ride so fun, is its interaction with the other coasters in the park. That is also a great moment of airtime. You dive underneath another guest pathway, enter an S-bend around the main structure holding up the lift and drop. And now we have a final stretch of track away from guest view. That's pretty much just another S-bend into the brake run. As a whole, we have almost 3,500 feet of track, and yet the ride feels kinda short. The duration once you leave the lift hill is around 45 seconds. The first ride I took on this was in the front row, and unfortunately, one of the biggest takeaways that I had from the ride was, wow, that was shorter than I was expecting. Interestingly enough, when then I rode it in the back row, I didn't think it felt like a short ride. I'd love to know the logic behind that, why a ride would feel short in the front but then not in the back. And I don't think it was because of the order I did those seats. I then rode again towards the front, and yeah, I was like, nah, it still feels short. I don't know what it is. It's very weird. I mean, as a whole, I don't think this is the strongest GCI. I mean, it keeps a great pace. I don't think that's the issue here. But just in terms of elements and transitions, I don't think that it is as strong as some of the other GCIs out there. I haven't done a tiered list of all of the different GCIs I've ridden, but I imagine this would be towards the middle, maybe lower half, which is interesting because, again, I said this is the tallest GCI built, so maybe it's one of those cases that, hey, taller and faster isn't necessarily better. I've said it many times, so Mystic Timbers is my favorite GCI, and that stays very low to the ground most of the time. So it's an interesting scenario. I think it's a very solid ride. Like I said, it's my favorite at Europa Park, but if it didn't have the theming that it did in the queue, I don't think I would like this ride anywhere near as much as I do. This is one of those coasters that you don't mind waiting for because the queue is so detailed, so incredible. I think it was my favorite queue in the park, probably one of my favorite queues I've ever seen. It's a great example of storytelling, setting the scene, getting you in the mood to ride, and having an awesome payoff when you get off because you just feel like you just had a whole experience as opposed to just one ride. So for its final score, I'm going to give Wodan Timbur Coaster an 8 out of 10. I give the queue like a 100 out of 10, but specifically focus on the ride experience. I think it's definitely a solid 8 out of 10. It's good, very enjoyable. I wouldn't say it completely blew me away, but definitely one that you will not want to miss when you visit Europa. But those are just my thoughts on one of Europe's best wooden roller coasters. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this. And of course, make sure to stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.